Hello everyone. This video will help you improve your listening skills and pronunciation in English. I suggest you pause after each sentence and try to repeat it. Today, we're sharing an incredible story about a woman whose entire life changed in a single night. Dr. Beatriz Martinez thought she knew everything about her past, until a mysterious stranger walked into her emergency room and whispered a childhood nickname she hadn't heard in 20 years. What this man revealed would shatter everything she believed about her parents' death and force her to confront a hidden truth that had been buried for decades. Let's go to the story. My name is Beatriz. I'm 39 years old. I live in Seattle. I work night shifts at Seattle General Hospital. I've been an emergency doctor for 12 years now. My colleagues know me as the quiet one, the reliable one, the doctor who never talks about her past. Last Tuesday started like any other night. I made my usual chamomile tea before leaving home, a ritual that calmed my nerves before each shift. I touched my star pendant, a habit I've had since childhood. The small silver star felt warm against my fingers. My apartment felt quiet. Too quiet. The silence always made me think of things I preferred to forget. I grabbed my keys, locked the door, and headed to the hospital through Seattle's empty streets. The emergency room was busy that night. 3 car accidents from the rain-slicked highways. 2 overdoses from downtown. 1 heart attack from a businessman who worked too many hours. I moved from patient to patient, my white coat flowing behind me. The familiar smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils. My hands were steady as I sutured wounds and checked vital signs. They always are. Steady hands were something I inherited from my father, though I rarely allowed myself to think about him. Then he walked in. The man had no ID, no insurance card, nothing in his pockets except loose change and a crumpled bus ticket. He was maybe 60 years old, with silver gray hair that looked like it hadn't been combed in days. His tired eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much. Blood stained his faded blue shirt from a deep gash on his left arm, probably from broken glass. The nurses brought him to bed 7, the same bed where I had treated my first trauma patient years ago. I pulled on fresh gloves, feeling the familiar snap of latex against my wrists, and approached him with my standard professional demeanor. I introduced myself as Dr. Martinez and asked what had happened to him. He looked up at me slowly, as if emerging from a dream. His eyes went wide, pupils dilating in recognition. He stared at my face for a long moment, studying every feature like he was seeing a ghost. Then he smiled a strange, knowing smile that made my stomach tighten with unease. He whispered one word that changed everything. Estrellita. The world stopped. The busy sounds of the emergency room faded to nothing. The beeping monitors, the crying children, the hushed conversations, all of it disappeared. Nobody had called me that in 20 years. Estrellita, little star, my grandmother's special name for me, spoken with such tenderness in her weathered voice. The name from my childhood in El Salvador, from dusty streets and the smell of pupusas cooking. The childhood I never talked about with anyone. The life I left behind when I was 19, carrying nothing but a bus ticket and my mother's star pendant. I asked him what he had said, though I heard him perfectly. My voice came out as barely a whisper, cracking with emotion I fought to control. He told me I looked just like her, just like Maria Elena, my mother. He spoke her name with such reverence, Such familiarity that tears immediately sprang to my eyes. My mother. Dead for 20 years. I hadn't spoken her name aloud in years, afraid that saying it would bring back all the pain I had buried so deep. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, but I was lying. My hands shook as I cleaned his wound with antiseptic, the medical training taking over while my mind reeled. I tried to focus on the familiar routine, assess the injury, clean the area, prepare the sutures, but he kept talking. His voice was gentle but insistent. He mentioned the pendant, pointing with a gnarled finger toward my chest. He said she wore one just like that. A star. He said she told him it would protect me, that it would keep me safe no matter how far I traveled from home. My hand flew to my throat instinctively. The star pendant was hidden beneath my scrubs, invisible to anyone looking at me, but somehow this stranger knew it was there. Knew its significance. Knew its story. I asked who he was, my voice stronger now, but my hands still trembling. Miguel Torres, he said without hesitation. He told me he worked with my father. Before everything happened. Before the night that changed everything forever. Before everything happened. The phrase hit me like ice water in my veins. My parents died in a car accident when I was 19, at least that's what my Aunt Rosa told me. That's the story I had carried for 2 decades. That's what I believed when I cried myself to sleep for months after arriving in Los Angeles with nothing but the clothes on my back and a heart full of grief. I finished stitching his arm in complete silence, my mind racing with questions I couldn't voice. This man knew things. Deep, intimate things about my family. Things I had buried so far down, I sometimes wondered if I had imagined my entire childhood. The way he said my parents' names, the way he looked at me, it was like he had known them personally. Like he had been there. Sarah, one of the night nurses, interrupted us with her usual efficiency. She told me my patient in bed 3 needed immediate attention, possible internal bleeding from the earlier car accident. I looked back at Miguel, my eyes pleading. I told him not to go anywhere. I said we needed to talk more. We needed to finish this conversation that had already turned my world upside down. But when I came back an hour later, after stabilizing the car accident victim and sending him up to surgery, bed 7 was empty. Miguel Torres was gone. The sheets were folded neatly, as if he had never been there at all. The nurses said he left without signing the discharge papers, without giving an address or contact information, without a trace. He had simply vanished back into the Seattle night like a ghost from my past. I couldn't sleep that day. I sat in my small apartment, still in my scrubs, holding my star pendant between my fingers. The metal felt different now, warmer, more significant. Estrelita. The name echoed in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming. I pulled out my laptop and searched desperately. Miguel Torres. El Salvador. Civil War. Refugees. Nothing useful came up in my frantic searches. Just generic articles about a conflict I had tried so hard to forget. The next night at work, I couldn't focus on anything. Every patient who walked through the doors reminded me of him. Every face looked familiar, like someone I should remember from a life I had left behind. I made mistakes, small ones that no one else noticed, but mistakes nonetheless. I gave the wrong dosage instructions to a patient with pneumonia. I almost missed a concussion in a teenager who fell off his skateboard. Dr. Chen, the department head, pulled me aside during our break. He asked if I was okay if I needed to take some personal time. I told him I was fine, forcing a smile that felt like plastic on my face. But I wasn't fine. I was unraveling thread by thread. Every certainty I had built my adult life on was crumbling. On Friday, after 3 sleepless days, I finally called my Aunt Rosa in Los Angeles. I hadn't talked to her in 6 months. We had grown distant over the years, speaking only on birthdays and holidays. I told her I needed to ask something important about my parents, about how they really died, about what really happened that night in El Salvador. The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller. She asked why I was asking this now, after all these years. There was fear in her voice, the kind of fear that comes from keeping dangerous secrets for too long. I told her I needed to know the truth. I was tired of living a lie, tired of feeling like a stranger in my own life. Another pause. Then she sighed deeply, a sound that carried 20 years of hidden pain. She told me to visit her that weekend. She said some things couldn't be said over the phone. Some truths were too heavy for long-distance conversations. I drove to Los Angeles that Saturday, taking my old Honda Civic on the familiar Interstate 5 route. 5 hours of endless highways stretched before me. 5 hours of questions spinning in my head like a tornado. The desert landscape blurred past my windows. Brown hills, scattered trees, truck stops that all looked the same. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, my star pendant catching the sunlight that streamed through the windshield. Aunt Rosa's house looked smaller than I remembered, like everything does when you return to places from your childhood. The same faded blue paint, the same chain link fence, the same struggling garden in the front yard. She greeted me at the door with worried eyes and arms that felt frailer than before. We sat in her tiny kitchen, surrounded by the same religious candles and family photos that had been there for decades. She made coffee with hands that trembled slightly. The familiar ritual of grinding beans and heating water felt like a ceremony, a preparation for confession. She began slowly, carefully, like someone walking through a minefield. She told me my parents didn't die in a car accident. The words came out as a whisper, as if saying them too loudly would make them more real, more devastating. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt dizzy, like the kitchen was tilting around me. I asked her what she meant, though part of me already knew the answer would change everything. She explained they were killed, shot, during the civil war that tore our country apart. She said my father was helping people escape, refugees, families, anyone the government wanted to disappear. My mother worked with him, using their small grocery store as a safe house. They weren't just shopkeepers, as I had always believed. They were part of an underground network that saved dozens of lives. The room spun around me like a carnival ride. 20 years of lies. 20 years of believing a sanitized story designed to protect a traumatized teenager. 20 years of thinking my parents died randomly, senselessly, instead of heroically. I asked why she hadn't told me the truth from the beginning. Why she had let me live a lie for 2 decades. She said I was so young when it happened, so traumatized by what I had witnessed. She said the therapist in Los Angeles told her it was better to let me forget the violence, to give me a new story I could live with. A normal story about a tragic accident instead of a devastating truth about war and heroism and sacrifice. I asked about Miguel Therese and I watched her face go pale. She wanted to know how I knew that name, why I was asking about someone from a past we had both tried so hard to forget. I told her he found me at the hospital in Seattle. He called me Estrelita and knew about my mother's pendant. Tears filled her eyes. The first time I had seen my strong aunt cry since my parents' funeral. She told me Miguel was my father's best friend, his partner in the underground network. They worked together for 3 years, moving families across borders, hiding people in safe houses, coordinating with other resistance groups. The night my parents died, Miguel was supposed to be with them on their final mission. But he got sick severe food poisoning from bad seafood. My father insisted on going alone rather than postponing the rescue of a family that was in immediate danger. She said, Miguel blamed himself for surviving. He disappeared after the funeral, consumed by guilt that he couldn't carry. She hadn't seen or heard from him in 20 years. She thought he was dead. I spent that entire weekend in Los Angeles, learning about my real past from photographs and letters that Rosa had hidden away. My father wasn't just Roberto Sanchez, the friendly shopkeeper. He was Roberto Sanchez, the man who helped over 60 families escape death squads. My mother wasn't just Maria Elena, who made the best pupusas in the neighborhood. She was Maria Elena, who turned their store into a sanctuary and risked everything to save strangers. Miguel Torres had been looking for me for years, Rosa explained. He wanted to tell me the truth about who my parents really were. He wanted me to know they died as heroes, not victims of random violence. He had been searching immigration records, hospital databases, anywhere he thought he might find traces of the little girl who disappeared into America with nothing but a star pendant and a new identity. On Monday night, I was back at work in Seattle. The emergency room felt different now, not just a place where I treated broken bones and heart attacks, but a place where I carried on my parents' work of saving lives. Everything felt different. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter. The sounds were sharper. I wasn't just Dr. Martinez anymore, the quiet physician with no past. I was Estrelita, the daughter of Maria Elena and Roberto Sanchez, freedom fighters who died so others could live at exactly midnight. As I was reviewing patient charts, Miguel walked into the emergency room again. This time I was ready for him. I had been waiting, hoping he would return. I called his name across the busy room. I told him I had been waiting for him, that we had unfinished business. He smiled the same knowing smile from before, but now I understood what it meant. It was recognition. It was relief. It was the smile of someone who had finally completed a 20-year mission. He said my aunt had told me everything. It wasn't a question, somehow he knew. I confirmed she had told me everything. About the war. About the network. About how they really died. We talked until sunrise, sitting in the hospital cafeteria over terrible coffee that grew cold as we spoke. We talked about my parents, not the sanitized versions from my childhood memories, but the real people who risked everything for strangers. About the civil war that destroyed so many families. About the pendant that my mother pressed into his hands the night before she died, making him promise to find me someday and tell me the truth. About why he never stopped looking for me, even when the trail went cold for years at a time. He told me my father saved his life 3 times during their years working together. Once from a government patrol, once from a rival gang, and once from his own despair after his wife was killed. He said he owed him everything. He owed me the truth about who I really was. I asked why now, after all these years. Why reveal himself when I'd built a successful life as someone else? He told me simply that he was dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe less. He said he couldn't die knowing I didn't know who I really was, that my parents' sacrifice had been forgotten. We sat in silence as the morning light crept through the hospital windows. My star pendant caught the early sunlight, casting tiny rainbows on the white cafeteria table. Just like my mother's pendant used to when she cooked breakfast in our small kitchen in San Salvador. I asked what happened now. What was I supposed to do with this earth-shattering information? He told me now I could choose. I could stay Dr. Martinez, the woman who saves lives in Seattle's emergency rooms. Or I could be Estrelita again, the daughter who carries on her parents' work in whatever way felt right. He said the choice was mine, but either way, I would never be the same. I touched my pendant, feeling its familiar warmth against my skin. My mother's star. My father's legacy. The symbol of protection that had carried me thousands of miles from home. I told him maybe I could be both, Dr. Martinez and Estrelita. The successful American physician and the daughter of Salvadoran heroes. Miguel smiled, and for the first time since he had walked into my life, he looked peaceful. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an old photograph, creased and faded from years of carrying. My parents stood together in front of their store, young and smiling. My mother wore her star pendant, identical to mine. My father's arm was wrapped around her waist, both of them looking directly at the camera with expressions of hope and determination. He said they would be proud of who I had become. Proud that their daughter grew up to save lives, just like they had. I looked at the photograph, then at Miguel, then at my reflection in the cafeteria window. For the first time in 20 years, I saw my mother's eyes looking back at me. I saw my father's determined jawline. I saw who I really was. 3 months later, I started volunteering at the Immigrant Resource Center downtown, just a few blocks from the hospital. I help undocumented families navigate the healthcare system. I translate for them during medical appointments. I teach English to their children in the evenings. It feels like the most important work I've ever done. Every morning before my shift, I touch my star pendant and remember. I am Dr. Beatriz Martinez, emergency physician. I am also Estrelita Sanchez, daughter of heroes. I carry their light forward in everything I do. Miguel died last month, peaceful and surrounded by the few friends he had left. I was holding his weathered hand when he took his last breath. His final words were a whispered thank you for remembering, for carrying the story forward. I remember everything now. The truth doesn't hurt anymore. It gives meaning to every life I save, every family I help, every moment I spend honoring my parents' memory. Tonight, I made chamomile tea before work, just like always. I touched my star pendant just like always. But my apartment doesn't feel quiet anymore. It's full of memory, full of purpose, full of the light that my parents died protecting. I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. If you enjoyed this story and it helped you practice your English, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought about Beatriz's journey from Seattle to her past. I'd love to hear your thoughts and stories.